Good morning, Barb McQuade.
Good morning, Stephanie. I have never had such a joyous introduction before. But thank you.
Who has a new ringtone? Okay.
That's right.
You must still be fired up from all that mountain biking.
Yes, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
And I have to admit, listen, I love all my legal ladies, everybody on the Sisters-in-Law podcast. I believe Joyce Vance even said something nice to me on Twitter, and I will confess to you that I gave her a Roll Tide when I know that she talks smack at you like that a lot, and I know I would like to...
As long as you offset it with a Go Blue now and then, I guess it's okay.
But I know the Michigan women's gymnastic team just won, and you said, congrats, national champion. So, go, is it Wolverine? What is it, Wolverines?
Go Blue, yeah, Wolverine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would like to both say Roll Tide and go Wolverines because I love both of you. So, but now you are jingled like everybody else in the club. So there. And also you did a Superwoman graphic. You got your second COVID shot.
I did. I got it on Friday, and it's just such a great feeling to know. And I'm so impressed with the vaccine, with the way it's been rolled out in my state. We've got about a third of the state now has been vaccinated. So. It is a very empowering feeling. I encourage everybody to do the same.
Which team are you on? We're having vaccine rap wars here on the Stephanie Miller Show.
Oh, I got Pfizer.
Oh, okay.
I was happy to take what they were giving.
All right, let me second
right.
jingle you for a moment.
This girl is on
Pfizer.
Okay. All right. All right, here you are, freshly double jingled, and
That's right.
Let's talk about closing arguments in the Chauvin case today, first of all. By the way, you get a good tip on Twitter. You said, tip for lawyers, advise witnesses to avoid being needlessly combative when answering questions. In the Chauvin trial, this witness is losing credibility by refusing to agree that Chauvin was on top of George Floyd and likely to cause pain. You don't have to win every question. Just as a layperson, Barb, I felt like this defense really was weak and kind of, allowed the prosecution to end with the recalling the pulmonologist. What did you think?
Yeah, well, one of the advantages prosecutors have in the structure of trials, there are a lot of advantages to the defense, like the prosecution bears the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But one of the advantages the prosecution get is having that last word. And so they did sort of open the door to repeating their last witness. Like, let's call that guy again, who said all that really great stuff about the cause of death was breathing. And so they did open the door to that. But I think that's what defense attorneys do. It's a strong case, I think, for the prosecution. And so what a defense attorney tries to do is just poke enough holes in things. What are the elements of the offense, and where might I be able to just chip away and create enough reasonable doubt in even one juror that I can get a not guilty verdict or even a hung jury. And so causation is one of those, and whether Officer Chauvin acted reasonably is the other. And so those were kind of the two touch points. Everyone saw what he did on video, so you can't refute whether he did or didn't do that thing. And so what's in his mind and what caused death are the things that are kind of invisible to us. And so he called some experts to try to just create a little bit of doubt there. And if even one juror finds it persuasive, that could be enough to prevail. So I think you're right. It wasn't overwhelming the way, I think sometimes we see a lot of great legal arguments on TV and TV shows and movies. And in real life, it's often much more tedious. It's really just going to the elements of the offense. And I think the defense attorney did what he could do with what he had.
Yeah. Well, so what is your take overall on, it's interesting. I think I saw two different legal analysts yesterday, and one said, almost sure there'd be a conviction of some kind, and the other not so sure. What is your take in total? And how,
well,
go ahead.
One thing that I've learned over the years is that juries can be very unpredictable. If I were on this jury, and of course it's difficult to put yourself there because although I've followed it pretty closely and I've watched most of it, you're not there for every second of every day. And I don't know, Stephanie, if you're a sports fan who likes to go to live sporting events.
Yeah.
But you'll notice the difference between when you watch, say, a baseball game on television and when you go in person. You see most of the important stuff. You see the pitcher, you see the batter, you see the fielder when you watch on television, but you miss all the other stuff that's going on. You know, the signs from the third base coach as the batter watches, the infielders repositioning themselves and signaling who's going to cover second base on a steal. You know, there's all this other stuff going on. And similarly, in a courtroom, jurors are watching a lot of other things that may not be visible to us. The body language of Derek Chauvin, for example, the body language of fellow jurors. So there's a lot of things unknown to us. But all that being said, I think the prosecution has made a very strong case here, and as you said, at least for something. I think they've got a very strong case of culpable negligence. They've got a very strong case for depraved heart murder, too. Murder 3, even, which is a little bit harder, you'd have to show that he committed an assault, and then that death resulted there. But again, all you need is one juror who says, boy, I don't know. You know, I believe the prosecution expert, but then this other expert testified just to the opposite. And if one expert says one thing and one says the other, don't I have to say that's enough for reasonable doubt and side with the defense? And so I think that it's difficult to predict what juries might do.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. Racism is such a theme through everything in the news, really, today, isn't it? And you commented on Twitter. You said, as we know, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We all need to denounce this replacement theory that certain groups don't belong in America. It's ugly and antithetical to our American values. And you commented on what's happening in Michigan. You said CEOs of Michigan's top 30 companies warn legislature against restricting voting access for historically disenfranchised communities, persons with disabilities, older adults, racial minorities, low-income voters. This is about democracy, not politics. I mean, that's the hopeful part, right, is that so many companies are standing up against, and Republicans sort of don't know what to do, right? Mitch McConnell's all over the place, bashing corporations, then trying to defend them, still get their money, right?
Yeah.
Right, they are citizens, but you got to stay out of politics unless you're giving your money to me. That seems to be the message there from Mitch McConnell and other Senate Republicans. But I do find it heartening. It's very interesting. Over the past 4 years, I think we've regressed so much in terms of race relations in this country, and because people felt empowered to say out loud some really ugly racist things. Whereas in the past, people shunned that kind of behavior as antithetical to our American values. And so I think it is very heartening to see corporate America, which is, you know, represents probably a very conservative strain, that, you know, taking away the right to vote for certain Americans isn't a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. And so I do think that gives me some hope. Conservative entities like Major League Baseball, which doesn't typically like to take positions on political matters, I think is saying, you know, voting isn't really a political issue versus parties. It's not a blue versus red issue. It is part of our constitutional rights. And, you know, if you are afraid to have people vote, that should tell you something perhaps about the popularity of your positions. Maybe it's time to change your positions and not the right to vote. Yeah.
Well, to say this isn't partisan issue, right, but Republicans make everything partisan. I saved this for you. Senator Thom Cotton promises to obstruct every single U.S. attorney nominee from, quote, any state represented by a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. I mean, as a former U.S. attorney, just this level of partisanship, you tweeted about, you said the idea that Vanita Gupta is radical is like saying apple pie's radical. She's smart, experienced, and highly qualified. DOJ needs her to get to work as associate AG. I mean, they just reflexively make everything partisan now, don't they? The Republicans?
Yeah, I'm really troubled by this idea that we're going to withhold confirmation for U.S. attorneys. It's such an important job. You know, if there's a particular U.S. attorney candidate that you think is not qualified or is too partisan to hold the job, that's a different conversation. But to say I'm just going to systematically exclude or try to block confirmation for all of these U.S. attorneys is really bad government. U.S. attorneys are essential to law enforcement in our communities, to public safety in our communities, and
terrorism. Yeah, I mean, fighting everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this delay while we have acting U.S. attorneys, you know, they're making do, they're moving cases along, but in terms of, you know, actual leadership and effectuating some of the policy vision that America voted for in President Biden, we need those U.S. attorneys in place, and this kind of obstructionism just isn't good for good governance.
And sisters-in-law is the perfect example of why we can all just get along, right? I mean, you can have professors from University of Alabama rolling tide along with University of Michigan Wolverines, and we can get along.
Absolutely, and we don't always agree on every issue, but we talk with each other respectfully, and at the end of the day, we're all friends. And I would hope that we can all strive to come somewhere closer to that. We've seen such a partisan rancor to the point of gridlock in Congress and our state houses, and I think the public is tired of it. It's time to get back to work. We want to achieve things. When we work together, we can achieve great things in government.
So, speaking of partisan gridlock, real quick, I have two other major things I got to ask you. Fear of Trump has Republicans dragging their feet on investigating the Capitol. And the founding member of the Oath Keepers, John Schaefer, set to enter first guilty plea and start, obviously, potentially cooperating or flipping, right, on the Capitol. So, are we going to get justice ultimately in the Capitol? Because obviously it doesn't appear there's going to be any 9/11 commission, because Republicans here once again want ridiculousness, like Antifa investigated, who had nothing to do with the Capitol, right? Because they're afraid of Trump and that this all leads to Trump. So if there is not an investigation really in Congress, is there going to be justice in Merrick Garland's DOJ for this Capitol riot? I mean, obviously that's a hopeful thing that the first Oath Keeper has flipped, right?
I believe there will be. I think one of the things that's helpful here is, unlike Robert Mueller's investigation, where ultimately he was accountable to William Barr, who took Robert Mueller's report and then candy-coated it and put it out, shared it with Congress, who had no appetite for impeachment. And so in that way, we saw a dead end there. Here, on the other hand, the ultimate decision-maker is going to be Merrick Garland. President Biden has said he'll stay out of his way. Merrick Garland, who is someone who is objective and fair, comes from many years in the judiciary, I think does not have an axe to grind. And so justice, whatever that may be in terms of fact and law, I think he will push to find it. They've got hundreds of cases, including, as you said, we're now seeing an Oath Keeper who has agreed to cooperate. And so we're going to see what's in people's text messages and emails and on social media. We're going to hear about their conversations, and we're going to hear how high of a level this case went. We know that we've seen some of these insurrectionists with Roger Stone the day before the insurrection, and so we'll find out what was going on.
And he's obviously the DOJ charging Roger Stone for tax evasion, which I like that they're leaving no Roger Stone unturned. So that's good. He won't get a pardon this time.
Turn a phrase, can't get a pardon for a civil debt.
Right. Well, and you brought up, Barb, that was the last thing I wanted to ask you about. You brought up the revelations on Russia and the Mueller report. I just fail to see how we can just let this go, now that we all know there absolutely was collusion and 10 obvious counts of obstruction of justice. As Mueller said, he, assumed he should be prosecuted. I mean, he is not president anymore. What do you make of all of this?
Well, what Robert Mueller said in his report was that although we don't think we have the power to charge a sitting president, we thought it was important to provide this report so that a future prosecutor, when Donald Trump is no longer president, would have the evidence and would be able to make that decision. And so there is certainly very strong evidence of obstruction of justice in that report by Donald Trump. And now we see this additional link between Konstantin Kilimnik that goes back to between the Trump campaign and Russia. So there's definitely more work to be done there should Merrick Garland choose to do it.
Oh, let's hope so. Oh, God, let's hope so. All right, sisters-in-law, again, is all of our awesome legal ladies, right? Jill Weinbanks and Joyce Vance and Barb McQuade and Kimberly Atkins. Sorry, don't want to ever forget her. Congratulations. It is a fantastic new podcast, and we are always thrilled when we can get a Wolverine and or a Roll Tider.
Thanks very much, Stephanie.
I am going to demand that Ari Melber use that jingle every time he introduces you or any show.
I kind of like it. I think even when I enter a room from now on.
Yes.
Sure
Travis, send that along for Barb's new ringtone. All right.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Barb. See you next time. Okay.